Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to do something pretty cool. We're going to crack open the latest financial report from Aadhar Housing Finance. We'll break down the numbers, figure out what they mean, and see what kind of story they're telling. So let's jump right in. Have you ever looked at one of these company reports and just felt your eyes glaze over? All the numbers, the jargon, it can be a lot. But what if you could read it just like your own personal budget? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do today. Turn all that complexity into simple, clear ideas. Here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with a quick snapshot of the company. Then we'll see how they actually make their money and, of course, what it costs them to do business. After that, we'll get into the profit story, check out their assets versus liabilities, and then wrap it all up with the big takeaway. Oh, and to keep things super simple, all the numbers we're talking about today will be in crores.
All right, first up, the financial snapshot. We're not going to bury the lead here. Let's get right to the big picture before we start digging into the nitty-gritty details.
So, what is an earnings report anyway? Honestly, the easiest way to think about it is like a regular financial health check for a company. It's kind of like their report card, showing exactly how well they did over a certain amount of time, like a few months. Okay, now for the fun part. Let's follow the money. This section is all about where Aadhar's income actually comes from. How do they bring cash in the door? And here we go. For the 3-month period from July to September 2024, the company brought in a total income of 764.3 crore. You can pretty much think of this as the company's total salary for that quarter. But where did that salary actually come from? This chart right here. This tells you everything you need to know. A huge 88% of their income comes from interest on the loans they give out. The rest is just a mix of some fees and other small gains. So this tells us, loud and clear, their main business is lending money. Simple as that. Of course, it's not all about what you make, right? You've got to spend money to make money. So this next section looks at the other side of that coin, the costs of running the business. So remember that 764.3 crore they earned? Well, 471.9 crore of that went right back out the door as expenses. It's just like how our own budgets have things like rent and bills. A company has its own set of costs to deal with. And this table shows us exactly where that money went. The biggest piece of the pie, by far, is finance costs, at over 285 crore. Now, this is really important. That's the interest they have to pay on the money they borrow to be able to lend out. After that, you've got employee salaries, and then all the other day-to-day costs of keeping the lights on. All right, we've seen the money coming in, and we've seen the money going out. So now it's time for the most important part, the profit story. What's actually left at the end of the day? And that leftover bit is what we call net profit. It's the bottom line. After all the bills are paid, it's the money the company actually gets to keep. You can just think of it as their take-home pay for the quarter. And here's where the story gets really interesting. Look at that growth. Back in the January to March quarter, the net profit was 201.5 crore. Fast forward just a bit to this latest quarter and boom, it jumped up to 227.5 crore. You can see it right there in the chart. A nice, healthy trend upwards. And to put a precise number on that trend, the company's net profit grew by nearly 13% in just about 6 months. Now that is a really solid sign of positive momentum. Okay, let's switch gears a bit and look at the company's foundation. We're talking about assets versus liabilities. Now, if the income stuff was like a video showing their performance over time, this part is more like a photograph, a snapshot of exactly where the company stands on one single day. So first, let's look at what the company owns. These are its assets. As of September 30th, Aadhar Housing Finance had total assets valued at over 21,000 crore. This includes stuff like cash and investments, but for them, the most important asset is the value of all the loans they've given out to customers. And now, for the other side of the coin, what the company owes. These are its liabilities. On that very same day, their total liabilities were about 15,210 crore. This is mainly all the money they borrowed from banks and other places, so they have the cash to fund their own loans. Putting them side by side like this really makes the picture clear, doesn't it? On one side what they own, on the other what they owe. And you can see right away the company owns significantly more than it owes. This balance is really the key to understanding how financially healthy a company is. And that difference between the two numbers, that's called equity. And at 5,872.3 crore, this basically represents the company's net worth. It's the value that would be left for shareholders if the company sold off all its assets and paid off every single one of its debts. A strong equity base like this is a sign of a really solid financial foundation. So we've looked at income, expenses, profit, and the company's foundation. We've covered the whole shebang. Now for the big takeaway. Let's put it all together and ask, what does it all really mean?
So what's the verdict from this health check? Well, revenue is strong, and it's coming from their core business, which is great. Profits aren't just stable, they're actually growing nicely. And the balance sheet shows a financially sound company that owns way more than it owes. All in all, this report paints a picture of a healthy and growing business.
Now, it is really important for me to be super clear about our mission here. We are not here to tell you whether to buy, sell, or do anything. Our only job is to demystify these documents, to give you the clarity and the tools to understand what the numbers are saying for yourself.
And that leads us to one last thing to think about. We've seen from the numbers that Aadhar is on a pretty solid growth path. But looking ahead, the much bigger question is this. How does a company like this navigate the future of housing finance in an Indian economy that's always changing? Now that's something to think about. Thanks so much for tuning in.